The galaxy thought humans were weak. They were wrong. For 300 years, humanity had lived among the stars. They had met hundreds of alien species. Some were friendly, some were not. But almost all of them looked at humans and saw nothing special. Humans were small. They were soft. They lived short lives. They came from a tiny blue planet on the edge of nowhere. The Galactic Council had a ranking system for all species. It measured strength, speed, intelligence, and technology. Humans ranked somewhere in the middle. Not bad, not good. Just average. That ranking was about to change. On the rust-colored plains of Varth Prime, a war had been raging for 2 years. The Kelvari Empire had attacked 3 human colonies without warning. They killed thousands of innocent people. Men, women, and children. The Kelvari were a proud warrior race. They stood over 2 meters tall. Their skin was covered in thick green scales. Their eyes could see in the dark. They believed that strength was everything. Their leader was a warlord named Gorath. He was the one who ordered the attacks on the human colonies. He was the one who laughed when he heard about the dead children. He believed humans were too weak to fight back. He was wrong. Sergeant Pardoin had been lying in the same spot for 47 hours. He had not moved. He had not eaten. He had barely slept. His body was covered in a special suit that made him look like part of the ground. Dust and small rocks covered his back. Insects crawled over his hands. He did not move. Beside him, hidden under the same kind of suit, was his spotter. Corporal Kim Yuna was younger than Do-hyun, but she was one of the best spotters in the Terran military. Her job was to watch, measure, and calculate. She looked through her scope at the enemy base 4 kilometers away. 4 kilometers. That was the distance between them and the target. To most species in the galaxy, this was an impossible distance for a sniper shot. The Kelvari's best marksman could hit targets at 800 meters. The insectoid Vreth could manage 1 kilometer on a good day. But 4 kilometers? That was madness. Yuna whispered into her communicator. Her voice was so soft that Do-hyun could barely hear her. Wind from the east. 7 meters per second. Temperature rising. Gravity is 1.3 standard. The target is on the balcony. Do-hyun did not reply. He did not need to. They had done this 100 times before. They knew each other like family. Through his scope, Do-hyun could see the warlord Gorath. The big alien was standing on a metal balcony, looking out at his army. He was surrounded by guards. Below him, thousands of Kelvari soldiers prepared for another attack on human positions. Ships flew overhead. War machines rolled across the ground. It was a display of power meant to scare anyone watching. Do-hyun was not scared. He had been training for this moment his entire life. He had learned to shoot on the mountains of Korea, where his grandfather taught him patience. He had practiced in rain, snow, and burning heat. He had failed 1,000 times before he succeeded once. And then he practiced 1,000 more times. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat dropped. The world around him seemed to fade away. There was only him, his rifle, and the target. Yuna made one final calculation. Ready when you are. Do-hyun did not rush. He waited for the perfect moment. The wind shifted slightly. Gorath turned his head to speak to one of his guards. In that moment, his throat was exposed. Do-hyun squeezed the trigger. The bullet left his rifle at incredible speed. It traveled through the thin air of Varith Prime, rising and falling with the strange gravity of this world. It flew for almost 3 full seconds. That was enough time for Gorath to finish his sentence. Enough time for him to laugh at something one of his guards said. Then the bullet arrived. Gorath fell. He did not even have time to look surprised. One moment he was alive, the most powerful warlord in the sector. The next moment he was dead. For a long second, nobody understood what had happened. The guards looked at their fallen leader. They looked at each other. They looked at the sky, thinking maybe a ship had fired some kind of weapon. They never thought to look at the distant hills 4 kilometers away. Why would they? Nothing could shoot that far. Then the screaming started. Do-hyun and Yuna did not move. They stayed perfectly still as chaos erupted in the enemy base. Alarms rang out. Soldiers ran in every direction. Ships took off and searched for an attacker they would never find. 3 hours later, when darkness fell over Vareth Prime, the 2 humans slowly crawled away from their position. They moved like ghosts, invisible to the thousands of enemy soldiers who wanted them dead. By the time the cavalry figured out what had happened, Do-hyun and Yuna were already on a ship heading home. The news spread across the galaxy within days. A human had killed the great warlord Gorath from 4 kilometers away with a single bullet. After waiting for almost 2 days without moving, alien commanders studied the reports. They ran the numbers again and again. The shot should have been impossible. The patience required should have been impossible. Yet it happened. On the Vreth homeworld, a young general named Skith read the report 3 times. He felt something he had never felt before. It was cold and uncomfortable. It sat in his stomach like a stone. It was fear. He sent a message to his superiors. It contained only one question, the same question that millions of aliens across the galaxy were now asking. What are these humans? Nobody had a good answer. But they were all starting to realize something important. Humans were not average. Humans were not weak. Humans were something the galaxy had never seen before, and they were just getting started. The jungle moon of Karath 7 was a terrible place to fight a war. The trees grew so thick that sunlight never reached the ground. Strange animals screamed in the darkness. The air was hot and wet and filled with biting insects. Even the plants were dangerous. Some had thorns that could cut through armor. Others released poison when you touched them. The Vreth had been fighting on this moon for 3 years. They were losing. Their enemy was a group of rebels who knew the jungle better than anyone. The rebels used the darkness and the trees to hide. They attacked quickly and then disappeared. The Vreth were fast and strong, but speed and strength meant nothing when you could not find your enemy. General Skith was running out of options. His soldiers were dying every day. His commanders were failing. He needed help from someone who understood this kind of war. He needed a human. Lieutenant Choi Yoonji arrived on Karath 7 with only a small bag and a long rifle case. She was not tall. She was not strong. She looked like she might blow away in a strong wind. The Vreth soldiers who saw her land thought someone had made a mistake. General Skith thought so too at first. He had asked for a legendary human sniper. Instead, he got this small, quiet woman who spoke softly and smiled too much. When will you begin hunting the rebel leader? Skith asked her on the first day. Yoonji looked at him with calm eyes. I will begin watching today. The hunting will come later. Watching? We already know where he is. Our scouts have found his base. We just cannot get close enough to kill him. Then you do not know enough, Yoonji said simply. She disappeared into the jungle that same day. Skith sent soldiers to follow her and protect her. She lost them within an hour. They returned to base confused and embarrassed. They were some of the best trackers in the Vreth army. They had never lost a target before. Days passed. Yoonji did not return. She did not call for help. She did not ask for food or water. She simply vanished. Skith began to worry. He sent search parties. They found nothing. He used heat sensors and motion detectors. They showed nothing. It was like the human had turned into a ghost. 1 week became 2. 2 weeks became 3. On the 18th day, Skith received a message. It came from a communication device that Yoonji had left behind. The message was short. Day 22. Sunrise. Watch the Eastern Valley. Skith did not understand, but he followed the instructions. He gathered his officers on a hill overlooking the Eastern Valley. They used their best equipment to watch and wait. At sunrise on day 22, the rebel leader walked onto his balcony. He did this every morning to watch the sun come up. It was the only time he left the safety of his underground bunker. A single shot rang out from somewhere in the jungle. The rebel leader felt dead. The war that had lasted 3 years ended in that moment. Skith's officers celebrated, but the general himself felt cold. He searched for Yoonji for hours. He finally found her 2 kilometers from the rebel base. She was lying in a shallow hole covered with leaves and mud. She had been there for 3 weeks. She looked thin and tired, but she was smiling. How? Skith demanded. How did you survive there for so long? How did you know he would be there at that exact moment? Yoonji climbed out of her hole slowly. Her body was stiff from staying still for so long. I watched, she said. I watched everything. His guards, his schedule, his habits. I learned that he wakes at the same time every day. I learned that his personal shield turns off for a small moment when it recharges. I learned exactly where to be and exactly when to shoot. But 3 weeks? You stayed in one place for 3 weeks. Yoonji nodded. On my world, we call this patience. We evolved this way. Long ago, before we had technology, humans could not run faster than the animals we hunted. We could not fight them with our bare hands. So we followed them. We walked after them for hours, for days, until they were too tired to run anymore. We were never the fastest or the strongest, but we were always the most patient. Skith's antennae pressed flat against his head. This was a sign of fear among his people. His people? He understood now why the galaxy was starting to fear humans. On the Vreth homeworld, everything was fast. The insects that his people hunted moved quickly. The predators that hunted his people struck without warning. His entire species had evolved to react instantly. Waiting was not in their nature. They could not understand patience because they had never needed it. Humans were different. Humans came from a world where the slow and steady won, where the creature willing to wait the longest was the one who survived. Your people are terrifying, Skith admitted. Yoonji laughed softly. It was a kind laugh, not a cruel one. We do not mean to be. We are just doing what we have always done, what we evolved to do. She picked up her rifle and walked toward the shuttle that would take her home. Then she stopped and looked back at the general. A human sniper is not a weapon, she said. We are a promise. A promise that no matter how long it takes, no matter how far you run, no matter how well you hide, we will be there, waiting. And when the perfect moment comes, we will take our shot. She smiled one last time. That is why your enemies should be afraid. Not because we are strong, not because we are fast, but because we will never, ever give up. Skith watched her go. He thought about her words for a long time. That night, he wrote a report for his superiors. In it, he recommended that the Vreth Empire never go to war with humanity. The cost, he wrote, would be too high. Not because humans had better ships or bigger armies, but because they had patience. And against patience, there was no defense. The stories spread across the galaxy like fire. Human snipers could shoot from impossible distances. They could wait for weeks without moving. They could disappear into any environment and become invisible. Some aliens said humans were not really alive at all. They said humans were ghosts wearing skin. Soon, the requests began arriving at Earth. First, it was the Vreth. They wanted to learn how humans did it. Then the Kelvari, still angry about their fallen warlord but smart enough to know they needed this skill. Then came the Threll, a quiet species that glowed in the dark. Then more and more, until Earth was receiving dozens of requests every day. The Terran military command discussed what to do. Some said they should refuse. The sniper skills were humanity's secret weapon. Why share them? Others said they should agree. Teaching other species would build trust. It would make friends. And besides, they said with knowing smiles, the aliens probably could not learn anyway. In the end, they built a school. They called it the Ghost Academy. It sat in a valley in the mountains of Korea, the same mountains where many legendary human snipers had learned their skills. The air was thin and cold. Snow fell for half the year. It was not a comfortable place. That was the point. Master instructor Lee Ji-won was put in charge of the school. He was 60 years old, but still strong. He had served as a sniper for 30 years. He had made shots that other humans thought were impossible. Now his job was to teach aliens what he knew. On the first day, 18 alien students gathered in the main hall. They came from 9 different species. Some were tall. Some were short. Some had scales. Some had fur. One was covered in thick plates of natural armor. Another seemed to be made entirely of a jelly-like substance. Ji-won looked at them without expression. He had taught humans for 20 years. This would be different. "Welcome to the Ghost Academy," he said. "You are here because your governments asked us to teach you. I will be honest with you now. I do not think most of you will succeed, but I will try anyway." A cavalry warrior named Drax laughed. He was even bigger than most of his species. His arms were as thick as tree trunks. "Why would we fail? We are stronger than humans. We can see better. We can hear better. Your weapons are not special. We can learn to use them." Ji-won nodded slowly. "You are probably right. You are faster and stronger. Your senses are better. But being a sniper is not about any of those things." "Then what is it about?" asked a Vreth named Kali. Her compound eyes reflected the light in strange patterns. Ji-won smiled for the first time. "It is about being still. Today, your first lesson is simple. You will sit in this room and do nothing. No moving, no talking, no scratching. Just sit and wait." The aliens looked at each other. This seemed easy. They had expected something harder. 3 hours later, the cavalry warrior Drax was shaking. His muscles were built for action, for fighting, for moving. They were not built to stay still. His body screamed at him to stand up, to walk, to do something. Anything. He lasted 4 hours before he could not take it anymore. He stood up and walked out of the room, his head hanging in shame. The Vreth lasted longer. Their species was patient compared to the cavalry. But after 6 hours, their compound eyes began to cycle uncontrollably. This was a stress response they could not control. Their bodies were telling them that something was wrong, that sitting still for this long was dangerous. One by one, the aliens failed. They tried their best. They really did. But their bodies would not obey them. Evolution had shaped them for millions of years. That shaping could not be undone in a single day. By the end of the first day, only 2 students remained sitting. One was a Thrall named Vek. He glowed a soft blue color when he was calm. Right now, he was barely glowing at all. Every part of his body wanted to move, but he forced himself to stay still. The other was a human observer named Baek Ji-young. She was not even a student. She was just there to watch and take notes. But she had been sitting in the same position for 12 hours without any sign of discomfort. Vek looked at her with wonder. "How do you do it?" he asked through his translator. Ji-young seemed surprised by the question. "Do what? Stay so still. Your body must be screaming at you to move." Ji-young thought about it. "Not really. This is actually quite comfortable. I spent 3 days in the swamp once, waiting for a target. This is nothing compared to that." Vek's glow flickered. This was the thrill expression of surprise and fear mixed together. 3 days in a swamp? Yes, the bugs were the worst part. They crawled everywhere, but you get used to it. Vec realized something important in that moment. Humans were not pretending to be patient. They were not forcing themselves to be still. For them, this kind of waiting was natural. It was easy. It was part of who they were. His species had evolved on a world where sitting still meant death. Predators would find you. The cold would kill you. You had to keep moving to survive. Humans evolved differently. On Earth, sometimes the best thing to do was nothing. Hide, wait, let danger pass. The humans who could do this survived. The ones who could not died. Over millions of years, humans became masters of stillness. Vec was starting to understand why human snipers were so legendary. It was not their weapons or their training. It was their nature. They were built for this in ways that other species simply were not. He looked at Master Instructor G1, who was still sitting calmly at the front of the room. Will any of us ever be as good as a human sniper? Vec asked. G1 was honest. Probably not. Your bodies will fight you. Your instincts will betray you. You can learn techniques and skills, but you cannot change millions of years of evolution. He paused and looked at the few remaining students with something like respect. But that does not mean you cannot become good. Different, but good. Each species has its own strengths. We will find yours. And maybe together, we will create something new. Vec appreciated the honesty. He decided to stay and learn whatever he could. 3 months later, he was the only alien student still at the academy. He never became as good as a human sniper. Nobody expected him to. But he learned enough to make a difference, and he carried a lesson back to his people. A warning: never fight humans in a way that requires patience. You will lose. Every single time. The Dominion came from the far side of the galaxy. Nobody knew much about them. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had destroyed entire civilizations. Their ships were bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Their weapons could turn planets into ash. They had ruled their part of space for 10,000 years. Now, they wanted more. Meridian Station sat at the edge of human space. It was a small station, nothing special really. A few thousand people lived there. They mined asteroids and traded with passing ships. They thought they were safe because nobody important cared about them. The Dominion cared. 200 warships appeared in the system without warning. 50,000 soldiers prepared to land. The Dominion commander sent a simple message to the station. Surrender or die. The people of Meridian Station sent back their own message. Come and take it. The Dominion expected the battle to last a few hours. They had overwhelming numbers. They had better technology. Their ships had shields that could stop any weapon. Their soldiers wore armor that laughed at bullets. They had conquered species far more advanced than humans. They did not understand what they were fighting against. On the first day, the Dominion landed troops on the station. The battle went exactly as expected. Human soldiers fought bravely, but could not stop the advance. The Dominion pushed forward room by room, level by level. By sunset, they controlled half the station. That night, the Dominion commander sat in his temporary headquarters, planning the next day's attack. He was proud of his soldiers. Everything was going according to plan. Then his head of security disappeared. Not killed in battle. Not captured. Just gone. He was walking through a secure corridor one moment. The next moment, he was not. The cameras showed nothing. The sensors detected nothing. He simply vanished. The commander was confused but not worried. Strange things happened in war. He promoted a new head of security and went to sleep. The next morning, that officer was gone too. Now the commander was worried. He doubled the guards around all senior officers. He increased patrols. He used every sensor and camera available. Nothing helped. On the third day, his chief engineer vanished. On the fourth day, his medical officer. On the fifth day, his communications specialist. The Dominion soldiers began to whisper. Something was hunting them. Something they could not see. Something they could not fight. They started looking over their shoulders. They jumped at shadows. They stopped sleeping. Specialist Han Minho smiled when he heard these reports. He was floating in the darkness of space, his body attached to a small asteroid half a kilometer from the station. He had been there for 8 days. His suit kept him alive, recycling his air and water, keeping him warm in the cold of space. He was one of 47 human snipers scattered around Meridian Station. Some were inside the station, hidden in maintenance tunnels and storage rooms. Others were outside, floating in the void like Minho. All of them were waiting. The Dominion had amazing technology. Their shields could stop plasma fire. Their armor could take direct hits from missiles. Their sensors could detect ships from millions of kilometers away. But they had never fought human snipers before. Minho watched through his scope as a Dominion officer walked across a landing pad. The officer was surrounded by guards. He wore the heaviest armor available. He thought he was safe. Minho waited until the officer turned his head slightly. This exposed a tiny gap between his helmet and his neck armor. The gap was barely 2 centimeters wide. It appeared for less than a second. That was enough. Minho squeezed his trigger. The bullet flew across the distance between them, a tiny piece of metal moving faster than sound. It found the gap. The officer fell. The guards spun around, weapons ready. They scanned every direction. They saw nothing. Minho was just another piece of rock floating in space, invisible and patient. Across the station, the same scene played out again and again. Dominion officers fell one by one. Sometimes they were shot from incredible distances. Sometimes they disappeared into dark corridors and never came out. Sometimes they simply dropped dead with no explanation at all. The Dominion fleet tried to help. They scanned for snipers with every tool they had. They found nothing. The humans were too well hidden, too patient, too good at their job. After 2 weeks, the Dominion had lost over 300 officers. Their command structure was falling apart. Soldiers refused to leave their ships. Nobody wanted to be the next to die. The Dominion commander finally agreed to talk. Captain Park Soo-yoon represented the humans at the meeting. She was not a sniper herself, but she understood their value. She looked at the Dominion commander with calm eyes. "You have more ships than us," she said. "You have more soldiers. You have better technology. But you are losing." The commander's tentacles twisted with frustration. How are you doing this? We have killed thousands of your soldiers. You have killed only hundreds of ours. Yet we are the ones who are afraid. Soo-yoon smiled slightly. Numbers do not matter if you cannot find your enemy. Technology does not matter if you cannot protect what matters. You have been fighting our soldiers. You have been ignoring our hunters. She leaned forward. Every time one of your officers steps into the open, there is a human watching. Maybe from a building. Maybe from a ship. Maybe from a piece of rock floating in space. They are patient. They will wait for days, weeks, months if needed. And when the perfect moment comes, they will take their shot. The commander shuddered. On his world, predators attacked in groups with overwhelming force. They did not hide and wait. They did not pick off targets one by one. This human way of war was something he could not understand. "What do you want?" he asked. "Leave. Take your ships and go. Never come back to human space." The commander looked at his officers. They all nodded. None of them wanted to stay. The Dominion fleet left Meridian Station 3 days later. They had arrived with 200 ships and dreams of conquest. They left with 182 ships and nightmares that would last for generations. When asked later about the battle, the Dominion commander had only one thing to say. "We fought humans. Never again. They are ghosts wearing skin. You cannot defeat ghosts." The legend of human snipers grew even larger that day. Across the galaxy, species that had thought about attacking humanity changed their minds. The reward was not worth the risk. After all, who wanted to fight an enemy that could wait forever? 100 years had passed since the shot on Vareth Prime. 100 years since a human sniper had killed a warlord from 4 kilometers away and changed how the galaxy saw humanity forever. In that time, many things had changed. Humans had spread across thousands of worlds. They had made friends with dozens of species. They had fought wars and won most of them. But some things stayed the same. The legend of human snipers never faded. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year. General Beak Sujin sat in a beautiful garden on the planet New Sol. Cherry blossom trees surrounded her, their pink flowers falling gently in the breeze. A small stream ran through the garden, making peaceful sounds. It was a good place to spend her final years. She was 93 years old now. Her hair was white as snow. Her face was lined with wrinkles. But her eyes were still sharp, still watchful, still the eyes of a hunter. Around her sat visitors from across the galaxy. A Vreth ambassador with compound eyes that reflected the sunlight. A Calvary warrior who had learned to respect humans the hard way. A Thrall diplomat who glowed softly in the shade. Representatives from a dozen other species, all gathered to hear her speak. They came here often, these aliens. They came to ask questions. They came to understand. They came to learn the secret that had made humans so feared. Sujin poured tea with hands that still did not shake. 60 years as a sniper had taught her perfect control of her body. "You want to know our secret," she said. It was not a question. They all wanted the same thing. The Vreth ambassador leaned forward. His name was Tick, and he had studied humans for 50 years. "We have analyzed everything. Your weapons are good, but not the best. Your eyes can only see a small part of the light spectrum. Your reflexes are slower than ours. Yet your snipers are unmatched. After all this time, we still do not understand why." Sujin smiled. She had answered this question many times, but she never got tired of it. "Let me tell you a story," she said. "Long ago on Earth, there was an animal called a crocodile. It was not fast like a cheetah. It was not strong like an elephant. It was just a big lizard that lived in rivers." She took a sip of her tea. "But the crocodile was the most successful predator on Earth. Do you know why? Because it could wait. It would lie in the water, completely still, for days, weeks sometimes, just waiting for something to come close enough to catch. Most animals could not understand this. They would drink from the river 100 times without seeing danger. And then one day, when they stopped paying attention, the crocodile would strike." The aliens listened carefully. Sujin continued. "Humans watched the crocodile and thought, I can do better than that. We could not outrun our prey. We could not overpower them. So we learned to outlast them. We would follow animals for days until they were too tired to run. We would wait outside their dens until they had to come out. We became the most patient hunters on our planet." The Calvary warrior shook his head. "My people tried to learn this patience. We trained for years, but our bodies would not obey us." "No," Sujin agreed. "They would not. Because patience is not something you can learn. It is something you are born with. Our ancestors survived because they could wait. Yours survived because they could fight. We are different kinds of life." The Thrall diplomat spoke up. His glow patterns showed deep curiosity. But there must be more to it than just waiting. Many species can be still. What makes human snipers special? Sujin thought about this. It was a good question. Being still is only part of it, she said finally. The other part is harder to explain. When I was young, I spent 4 days lying in mud on a planet called Therax 9. I did not move. I did not eat. I barely breathed. I watched my target through my scope and learned everything about him. When he would wake up, when he would sleep, when he was careful, and when he was not. She looked at each of her visitors in turn. On the 4th day, I knew him better than his own family did. I knew exactly when he would step onto his balcony to smoke. I knew exactly how long his shield would be down. I knew exactly where to aim. And when the moment came, I did not hesitate. I did not doubt. I took my shot, and I ended a war. The garden was silent except for the sound of falling blossoms. That is what makes human snipers different, Sujin continued. We do not just wait. We watch. We learn. We become part of the place we are hiding. And when we finally act, we act with perfect knowledge. No guessing. No hoping. Just certainty. The Vreth ambassador spoke quietly. On my world, we have a word for creatures like you. We call them ghosts. Things that are there but cannot be seen. Things that watch and wait and strike without warning. Sujin nodded. That is a good word. I like it. She looked up at the sky, where distant ships moved among the stars. Somewhere out there, human snipers were watching. Always watching. I will tell you one more thing, she said. When I was young, I asked my teacher why humans became so good at this. He told me something I never forgot. The aliens leaned closer. He said that for 200,000 years, humans were not hunters. We were prey. We were food for things with bigger teeth and sharper claws. We should have died out. We should have become extinct like so many other species. Her eyes grew distant, remembering. Instead, we learned. We learned that if you cannot outrun death, you must outsmart it. If you cannot outfight death, you must outlast it. We spent 200,000 years being hunted, and we swore that we would never be prey again. She set down her teacup and looked at her visitors with eyes that had seen more death than they could imagine. That is the real secret of human snipers. We remember what it was like to be hunted. We remember the fear, the helplessness, the desperation. And we promised ourselves that we would become the hunters instead. We would become so good at hunting that nothing would ever hunt us again. The aliens sat in silence for a long time. Finally, the Calvari warrior spoke. And that is why you will always be better than us. We evolved as predators. You evolved as survivors who learned to become predators. Your hunger is deeper. Your patience is longer. Your will is stronger. Sujin smiled one last time. Yes, that is exactly right. She closed her eyes and leaned back in her chair. The cherry blossoms continued to fall around her dot in the centuries that followed. Her words were taught in military schools across the galaxy. Leaders and generals studied them. They learned an important lesson. Never fight humans in a war of patience. Never assume that stillness means weakness. Never forget that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous dot. And if you ever see a human sniper taking position, run. Because by the time you see them, it is probably already too late. They are watching. They are waiting. And they never, ever miss.